Now, what I want to share with you would probably contribute more to the thought leadership, particularly because the general Christian public is reading the Bible only for therapeutic and utilitarian reasons. Therapeutic in the sense what we can get out of God, utilitarian how to make God do things for us. And I think we need to go beyond that, and I'm sure TRACI is just the right kind of a movement that would be able to do this. I'm also speaking from my background in apologetics. One of the unintended consequences of apologetics is to give the idea that there is no mystery. Sometimes apologists have been introduced as being capable of answering all questions. That is a blasphemous introduction, and I don't think in TRACI you have such a problem. So I'm going to read out to you 3 takeaway statements. I'm going to read each of these statements twice and then try to go into this and then conclude with those 3 statements. The title is Towards a More Biblical Theology of Mystery. Towards a more biblical theology of mystery, because I'm afraid that the word mystery is completely being abolished. And so I wanted to say first, we worship God because we know Him partly and we do not know Him largely. We worship God because we know Him partly and we do not know Him largely. The second statement, a mystery does not explain itself, but it explains other important matters of reality. A mystery does not explain itself, but it explains or throws light on very important aspects of reality. The third one is a statement made by Charles Simeon. I came across this statement when I was on the EU committee in Madras from 1963 to 65, when I was a student at IIT. And Mr. P.T. Chandapala was the General Secretary at that time. He made this statement: truth exists at both extremes. Truth does not exist on one side or in the middle, but truth exists at both extremes. Attributed to Charles Simeon, who is supposed to be the forerunner of the evangelical students movement. Although the first intervarsity fellowship was started in the UK in 1928, and the IFES was formed in 1947. The UESI was formed in 1954. But Charles Simeon belonged to an earlier century. But he is the one who was supposed to have made this statement: truth exists at both extremes. Now let me develop on these 3 statements. Now, before President Xi Jinping of China took this present incarnation, I used to go every year to China, to Shanghai, to spend time with some of the underground church leaders. They have now advised me not to come till things change in China. And I remember in one of probably the occasion I remember best was for about 100 young people, including some from the westernmost province of China, Xinjiang, which is predominantly Muslim, but these Muslim background believers in Jesus traveled 3 days and 3 nights by train to reach Shanghai. And one of the topics I was dealing with was on the Trinity. So he was so fascinated by the doctrine of the Trinity that he came out with this statement: I want to know God exhaustively. I I want to know God exhaustively. I said there is a problem with that, because if I knew God exhaustively, He would not be an object worthy of worship. And I came up with this statement: we worship God because we know Him partly, and we do not know Him largely. Now, you may or may not agree with that. Let me tell you the reason why I am saying this. If we do not know God at all, we would not know that He exists. But if we knew Him exhaustively, He will be either equal to us or less than what we are. And therefore we find that God is known partly by His revelation, but largely to be known. Even in the new creation, when Jesus comes again, the church in that mysterious union with Jesus. A mystery does not explain itself, but it throws light, it illumines other aspects of reality. Now, this is an example I'm going to give to you. That I was working with the Rabbi Zacharias International Ministries at that time. It was based in Singapore. And we used to conduct 1-week summer schools in Oxford, in the UK, and then in the US. That year, it was to be held in Wheaton. It was a Monday to Friday program. And the Friday evening used to be an open forum, where the participants, about 120 of them, all Americans, white, black, colored, and so on, but they can ask the available faculty whatever questions they wanted. Now, my topic, I had to teach on the doctrine of the Trinity. By the way, I have a reputation that whatever I am invited to speak on, I would smuggle in the Trinity. Now, I think God is omnipresent. He doesn't have to be smuggled in. And I think that is part of the blasphemy. Now, let me tell you, during the Q&A session, this was the Friday evening, the last session of the program, one white American young man stood up and asked, and remember it was 2008 election year, but this was the month of July. In November, of course, Barack Obama got elected. And this white American young man asked me, should I be a Democrat or a Republican? No American would like to answer that question. There were 4 of us. Ravi was there, Stuart McAllister was there. There was another American faculty member, I forget his name, and I was there. They all passed the question on to me. I began by saying, I am very happy that I am an Indian Christian and not an American Christian, because you guys have to believe that one party is correct in everything and the other party is wrong in everything. We elect the least available, we choose or vote for the least available evil in all the candidates. And after having disarmed the question that way, I went on to say, we learned about the Trinity during this seminar. If you only emphasize the 3 persons of the Trinity without equally emphasizing the one community of the Godhead, from an economics point of view, you will be a free market capitalist, and politically you will be a Republican. If you emphasized only the one community of the Godhead without equally emphasizing the 3 persons of the Godhead, economically you will be a socialist, politically you will be a Democrat. In a fallen world, we cannot hold the tension between individual and community properly, and therefore you choose whichever party you want to join and be a conscience in that party. A mystery does not explain itself, but it throws light on several other aspects of reality. So I do want you to remember that. And then finally I come to this point about truth existing at both extremes. Now, great Bible teacher It's like John Stott and others have used the word balance. But I think the word tension will be more appropriate. And I'm going to give you 4 examples from the first 2 chapters of the Bible. And then another example, of course, is there in the Bible as well, but it's part of our current reality. The first is taken from the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God, who is spirit, creates the heavens and the earth, which are matter. Genesis 2:7, God forms the man from the dust of the ground, matter, and breathes into him the breath of life. One of the reasons why I wanted Jesus to come again is that there will be no PA system in the integration. I'm sure the electronics will be of a different order, and this check, we won't have to do it and we start speaking. I think you're able to hear me, right? That's fine. So you find that we humans are the only creatures, as far as our knowledge of the scriptures goes, who are a combination of spirit and matter. That is the first pair of words I want you to notice, because I know what TRACI is engaged in. I contributed to the exam with the help of Dr. Bonnie, a chapter in the first trip to CB in public theology. And I want you to notice that the spiritual and the material have to be taken together in a tension. Now, normally, we give a higher value to the spiritual rather than the material. And that is probably part of the problem, where the Christians say, no, the spiritual aspect is more important than the material. Jesus did not do that. I'll give you examples from the narratives of the Gospels. Did Jesus ever say to a sick person, if I heal you, you should become my disciple? Did he say to a healed person, now that I have healed you, you should be my disciple? You will say that, you will see that that is not true. He did not use his power of healing to trap people into the kingdom of God. He considered both as equally important. I want to tell you, this is one of the areas of tension which the Bible has, which the church has lost over the years, so much so that we have this problem about evangelism and social action, as if they are two opposite things. No, they were together in the life of Jesus. They are going to be together. Please remember, when we say matter, we affirm the reality of matter. We reject materialism, but we affirm materiality. Materiality is not an English word which is used in common conversation, but you find them in some philosophical journals. Materiality is the reality of the material world. Materialism is the view that the material world is all that there is. There is nothing beyond the material world. This is very similar to the pair of words rationalism and rationality. Rationalism is the view that reason is the only avenue of knowledge. We reject it. We believe in revelation. But rationality is the right use of reason. So we affirm materiality, the reality of the material world, and the needs of the material world that we observe, and we begin to address them without attaching a spiritual agenda. If I love a person in order to win him to Christ, that love becomes contaminated once it has an agenda. And please think about it. You do not have to agree with me, but I'm here to help you to think. Help TRACI to produce papers on these lines. The second pair of words is in Genesis 1, verse 26, God says, let us make Adam in our image. That is the interplay between the divine and the human. And you'll find that reality is a combination of both. When I finished my undergraduate degree from Madras University, those days Madras University had only 6 engineering colleges, not 600 like we have now. But I got a good rank, so my father was very happy. So he took me to meet the CSI, Church of South India Bishop of the Coimbatore Diocese, was Bishop Samuel Subramanian, a godly man from a Hindu background. And as a new Christian, wanting to appear very spiritual, I told him, Bishop, thank you for your congratulations, but it is not me, it is the Lord. And I still hear his ringing voice. He said, it is the Lord and you. And I want to tell you that was 62 years ago. And I want to tell you that those are some of the inputs that helped me to begin to see that God works only through humans. And you see that in Genesis 1, you see that in the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. As we say that prayer, do we realize that we are the answer to that prayer? That God is not going to work in the world except through humans. John 14 is known for the question of Thomas, but we very often neglect a question made by 2 other apostles. One was Philip, we will not go into that. But towards the end of that chapter, Judas, the other Judas, asked a question to Jesus. Why do you show yourself only to us and not to the world? Jesus' answer is not clear at all. The Bible makes you use your little gray cells. We cannot just take the Bible at face value. It is not self-evidently clear. In other words, Jesus, after his resurrection, did not go to Pontius Pilate and say, you got me crucified yesterday, look, I'm here. He didn't go to Annas and Caiaphas and show himself to them. No. He is going to do this only through the church, through God's people. So, God will not work except through humans. And that is the divine-human tension. And one of the things I learned several years ago, that I will not accept any labels, Calvinist, Arminian. You take Philippians 2 verse 12, if you took verse 12 alone, work out your own salvation, you will be an Arminian. If you took only verse 13, it is God who works in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure, you will be a Calvinist. If you take both verses together, you will be a Christian. And so you begin to understand that you reject labels. You begin to understand that these tensions are God ordained. The third tension is better seen in older translations of the Bible. Verse 26 of Genesis 1. Let us make Adam, singular, in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea. A singular noun followed by a plural pronoun is bad grammar, but good theology. Because when God created us, He wanted us to be a community. And we know that in our own lives, in our different cultures, as a young person grows up, what to study, where to work, whom to marry, you begin to see the tension between the individual and the community. It is not either or. It is both and. You have to keep them together. The fourth area of tension is male and female. And of course, I know I've been in some consultations where we came almost to bloodshed between complementarianism and egalitarianism. Reject labels. He made us male and female. The moment you put labels and you stereotype people, you are able to control them. And the Bible is about losing control. In fact, my introduction to the cross is that where God chooses to lose control over His creation and allow His creatures to crucify His Son. Because we are to control people. God is not control. God liberates us. And I want to tell you that the male-female particular tension in a positive sense is part of God's plan. And finally, a fifth tension is the now not yet tension. I do not know how many of you have tried to go to YouTube search and get the video audio recording of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, in his speech, Freedom at Midnight. He makes a statement like this. He says, the pledge that we made to our fellow Indians, we have redeemed substantially, but not entirely. We have redeemed substantially, but not entirely. Which is what you run into difficult verses like Colossians 1 verse 24, where Paul would go to the extent of saying, I'm filling up the afflictions which were missing or lacking in the suffering of Christ. Because the work that God has done for us brings us into a now, not yet tension. Now, during the COVID days, one of our good friends there, they actually run a Christian video games company, and they thought of the opposite of lockdown is open up. So they got several of us to give studies because we were not able to go out during the day, during the week, no worship on Sundays in churches. And I remember choosing topics which others would not handle. And the topic I suggested, towards a theology of unanswered prayer. Towards a theology of unanswered prayer. Particularly during the second wave of COVID, if you have been following the news, we lost some of our missionary couples who left their children as orphans to be taken care of by the grandparents. And Brother Ebenezer Sundara, his name was mentioned here, he spoke to me over the phone for an hour or so. I helped him to try and locate that particular talk. My argument was this, and I tell some of my hyper-charismatic friends, if all my problems are solved, all sicknesses are healed, everything is hunky-dory, and if Jesus says He's coming again, what will you tell Him? God, why do you want to come and spoil the party? We are having such a good time. At the same time, the Bible does not give you the option that when something goes wrong in our lives, we simply roll over and accept it as God's will. No. And that is the now, not yet tension. Please remember these four tensions. Please remember Charles Simeon. You will find it in Charles Simeon's biography, written by the British theologian Handley Moll. And because Handley Moll lived closer to our time, although it was more than 100 years ago. He was the great uncle of Charlie Moll, who lived much closer to our time, although he died rather suddenly. And I want you to locate the statement of Charles Simeon and take it very seriously. And I think that is going to lead the next years of TRACI into some fruitful contribution to the church to be engaged in society, recognizing the reality of its tensions. God bless you.